The ground trembled beneath Captain Lena Virex's boots as the dull thrum of the battle raged overhead. The once pristine walls of the space station now bore scars of shattered metal and scorched panels. Every corner reeked of burnt ozone and decay, the smell of a war that had dragged on too long. She clenched her fist around the comlink, voice steady despite the chaos. "Status, Lieutenant?" A crackled response came through. "Engines are down, Captain. The breach team reports heavy resistance. They're not going to get through to the reactor in time." Lena's eyes darted over the battlefield below, her pulse quickening. Every second counted, but this wasn't just another fight, it was the beginning of humanity's final stand. Her fingers tightened around the hilt of her combat blade, now drenched in the blood of those who had tried to stop her. "Fallback point. We move out now," she ordered, her voice sharp as broken glass. The situation was dire, but Lena wasn't about to let this station fall without a fight. Not while she still had breath in her lungs. She turned to her team of survivors, war-hardened soldiers who had fought tooth and nail for every inch of territory humanity still held in this corner of the galaxy. Their faces were smeared with dirt and blood, but in their eyes burned the same spark of defiance that had gotten them this far. "Keep moving. We're not done yet." They fell into line, boots pounding the metal floors as they made their way through the twisted, smoking halls of the once proud space station. Lena led them forward, her tactical mind racing through every possible outcome. There were no good options left, but there had to be one that wouldn't result in complete annihilation. The distant rumble of alien weapon fire echoed through the corridors, followed by a series of explosions that rocked the structure. One of the soldiers, Sergeant Mackenzie, winced as a piece of debris fell from the ceiling. "You sure this is the way, Captain?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. Lena didn't look back. "We're cutting through the core. The control room is a few floors up. We'll hold the line there. Our best chance of survival." "Right," Mackenzie muttered, but the skepticism in his voice was clear. Even the bravest soldiers had their limits when staring death in the face. Lena's mind flickered to her earlier briefing. The truth that had been revealed only hours before, the information that changed everything. Earth was gone, and what remained of humanity was scattered across the stars, fighting for scraps. The alien forces that had invaded were not just conquerors. They were hunters. The Nexus Overlords, they called them. Creatures born of an ancient race, twisted by a twisted ideology of survival at any cost. They didn't conquer worlds, they erased them. Earth had been their greatest prey, and humanity was simply the next in line for extinction. But Lena wasn't about to let that happen. She wasn't about to die quietly. "We need those reinforcements," she said, eyeing her communicator again. "Is the fleet on standby?" Mackenzie grunted, staring at his console. "Not until we secure the station. And if we don't, then we die," Lena finished for him. She wasn't afraid to say it. The truth was brutal but clear. She glanced at the faces around her, each one marked by scars and losses of their own. No one was asking for survival. They were asking for a shot at vengeance. "Captain?" A voice rang out from the far end of the hallway. One of the scouts, a young woman with streaked blonde hair and desperate eyes, dashed toward her. "What is it, Private?" Lena demanded, her tone tense. "They're here," the scout said, her breath ragged. "The Nexus. They've found us." The air in the hallway seemed to grow colder. Lena turned, her gaze hardening. Her instincts flared, a primal urge to fight surging through her. The Nexus had finally caught up with them, and they were relentless in their pursuit. But she wasn't about to let her people be slaughtered without a fight. "Everyone on me!" she barked. They moved in formation, weapons raised, as the first shadowed figures of the Nexus Overlords appeared at the far end of the corridor. Towering, insected beings, their bodies exuding an aura of cold, suffocating power. They moved with a strange, deliberate precision, like a predator who had hunted and killed for millennia. Lena felt the hairs on her neck rise as the first shot rang out, tearing through the station's weak walls. The sound echoed with finality, a grim signal that they were now completely surrounded. Captain, we're outnumbered, Mackenzie said, the fear evident in his voice for the first time. Doesn't matter, Lena replied. We fight. The enemy closed in, their mandibles clicking as they prepared to strike. In the back of her mind, Lena knew this was it. There was no way out. The station was too far gone, and their reinforcements were light years away. But she had a duty. She had soldiers who trusted her. And they were going to fight until their last breath. Then, out of nowhere, a distant hum filled the air. The sharp whine of a laser cannon. The walls shook again, but this time with purpose, violent and liberating. A voice crackled through her comlink. This is Admiral Kovar. We've arrived. Lena didn't hesitate. She signaled to her team. Prepare to engage. We hold this line until they get here. With a roar, she led the charge, blade raised high. A clash of metal and fury erupted as they collided with the alien forces. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, the adrenaline surging through her veins. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was the beginning of something far greater. It was the moment when humanity would prove its worth, when the galaxy would learn the true meaning of resistance. As the first Nexus soldier fell before her, she knew one thing for certain. Humanity wasn't done. Not yet. Cliffhanger *, the laser blasts from the fleet outside intensified, cutting through the enemy ranks. But a sudden explosion sent shockwaves through the station, throwing Lena off balance. A voice in her comlink whispered a final, chilling message. There's a traitor among us. The roar of explosions still echoed in Lena's ears as she staggered to her feet, her armor cracked and scorched from the blast. The sound of the battle outside had faded, replaced by a suffocating silence. Her vision blurred for a moment, but she blinked the fog away, forcing her body to respond. Every muscle ached, and her mind raced to make sense of the chaos. She had just survived a fight with a relentless alien enemy, and now something worse was waiting in the shadows. Status? She barked into the comlink, her voice hoarse, but filled with unyielding authority. Survivors accounted for. But there's a problem. Mackenzie's voice came through, grim. The breach team failed. We've lost control of the reactor. If we don't fix it, this station's going down with us. Lena pushed herself upright, shaking off the dust and debris. Her heart hammered in her chest. The reactor was their last line of defense. If it went, not only would they lose the station, but humanity's foothold in this sector would crumble, leaving them wide open to the Nexus Overlords. The thought gnawed at her resolve, but she couldn't afford hesitation. Head to the reactor. I'll rally the others. We're not leaving until this station stands. She disconnected the comlink and turned to face her ragged team, still reeling from the brutal firefight. They were battered, their faces streaked with dirt, their movements slow with exhaustion. But they were still alive, and that meant they still had a chance. Move out! Lena ordered, her voice firm and steady. We've got one last shot. If we lose the reactor, we lose everything. We fight until the end. They nodded in unison, rallying under her command. The team moved quickly, winding through the darkened halls of the station, their weapons raised and eyes scanning for any sign of the enemy. But the halls were eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of the damaged station and the faint whirring of machinery struggling to stay online. As they neared the reactor core, Lena's thoughts turned back to the earlier explosion. The sudden surge of energy that had ripped through the station wasn't just an accident. It was a coordinated strike. Someone had known exactly where to hit. A traitor. Lena's jaw tightened. The suspicion had started to form during the battle, but now it was clear. Someone within their ranks had betrayed them. The question was who, and why. Mackenzie, where are the others? Lena's voice was low, laced with suspicion. We're nearly at the reactor. Everyone else is in position, Captain. We're holding the line. Good. But stay sharp. Lena muttered, her hand tightening around her weapon. We've got a rat among us. The words stung more than she had anticipated. A traitor in their midst meant that they couldn't trust anyone, not even the soldiers who had fought beside them from the beginning. The implications were terrifying. If they didn't root out the saboteur now, they could find themselves on the wrong side of a gun when they least expected it. As they reached the reactor room, Lena signaled for her team to spread out. The door was locked, but not for long. Mackenzie had already begun working on the security override. His fingers moved quickly across the console, the faint beeping of the system echoing in the otherwise quiet room. "Almost there," he said, his voice tense but controlled. Lena watched him, her mind still turning over the traitor in their ranks. Whoever it was had to be close. She couldn't help but glance over her shoulder at the rest of the team, all of them focused on the task ahead, but not without a sliver of doubt creeping in. Who could it be? One of them, or perhaps someone they had trusted in the past? The door hissed open, and Lena motioned for them to move forward. The reactor chamber was a colossal room, its walls lined with towering cooling towers and exposed cables. A faint glow illuminated the area, casting long shadows across the floor. But as they stepped deeper into the heart of the station, Lena's instincts flared. Something was wrong. "Hold," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The team froze, weapons raised, scanning the area. A low hum, unnatural in its steadiness, vibrated through the air. The sound came from above, just before a series of laser shots tore into the wall beside them, sending sparks flying. "Ambush!" Mackenzie shouted, diving for cover. Lena's heart raced as she instinctively dropped to the ground. Gunfire erupted all around her. The traitor had set them up. They were walking straight into a trap. "Get to cover! Now!" she shouted. Her team scrambled for protection, exchanging fire with the unseen assailants. The crackle of gunshots reverberated through the chamber, the dim lighting barely enough to navigate through the chaos. Through the haze of smoke and debris, Lena spotted the figure that had triggered the ambush, a soldier, his helmet raised, his face twisted in a sneer. She knew him. Sergeant Reyes. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Reyes had been with them from the start. He had fought beside them in countless battles. But now, he was their enemy. He was the traitor. "Reyes!" Lena's voice rang out across the battlefield, sharp and commanding. "What the hell are you doing?" Reyes didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised his weapon, aimed directly at her, his eyes cold and detached. "You never understood, Captain. Humanity was always destined to fail. The Nexus, they promised me a place in the new order. I'm not about to let you ruin that." Lena's pulse quickened. The words cut deeper than she cared to admit. She had trusted Reyes, relied on him. Now, he was a weapon turned against her. Against humanity. "You're a fool, Reyes," Lena said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "The Nexus will destroy everything. You're just a pawn in their game. I'm not the fool here. You've never seen the bigger picture." Reyes took a step forward, his weapon still trained on her. Lena's eyes narrowed. "Then show me." Without warning, the room erupted into a deafening explosion. The traitor's last words were lost in the chaos, as a new force tore through the station, catching them all by surprise. The reactor began to hum louder, its core shifting in a violent tremor. The station was on the brink of collapse. Cliffhanger **. "Everyone, fall back!" Lena ordered, but before they could escape, the reactor's breach alarm screamed through the station. The traitor's betrayal had sealed their fate. The ground beneath Lena's feet shuddered as the reactor's core whined in protest. Sparks arced from exposed cables, casting erratic shadows across the dimly lit chamber. She had never seen a place so close to total collapse, and yet, here they were, surrounded by traitors, enemies, and a ticking clock that could end everything they had fought for. The hum of the reactor only grew louder, like the growl of a beast preparing to devour them whole. "Captain, we need to move. Now!" Mackenzie's voice snapped her from the haze of disbelief. His eyes were wide with fear, and she could see the uncertainty in his stance. It was clear, everyone was running on fumes now. Lena's gaze shifted to the traitor, Sergeant Reyes, who stood several meters away, his weapon still aimed at her. His lips curled into a grim smile, the kind of smile that said he knew something she didn't. The pain of betrayal burned deep within her chest, but there was no time to dwell on it. Not now. Reyes would pay for this later. I said fall back, Lena ordered, her voice commanding, but it did little to steady the chaos unfolding around them. There was no time for strategies, no room for second thoughts. The core was unstable, and the station was on the verge of self-destruction. The blast from the earlier explosion had only accelerated the reactor's meltdown. Their only option now was to escape, even if it meant leaving the very heart of humanity's last stand behind. As they ran, the corridor walls trembled, and the ceiling above cracked open, sending down debris in torrents. Lena ducked as a chunk of steel nearly clipped her helmet. The shrill alarm blared relentlessly, but it couldn't drown out the pulsing dread building in her gut. We're not going to make it, are we? Mackenzie's voice was barely audible over the clattering noise. He was right behind her, but she could hear the resignation in his tone. Fear had a way of making the bravest men lose their nerve. Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. The odds were stacked against them, and every step she took felt like it might be their last. But there was still something she could do. She wouldn't let her people die without a fight. Not after everything they had sacrificed. The hallway was chaotic, soldiers running past them in a mad scramble, some barely able to keep up with the pace. She could see fear in their eyes, the same fear she felt clawing at her chest. But she wouldn't let it consume her. Get to the hangar, she ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. We have one last shot. We're not abandoning this station. The hangar doors loomed ahead, but it felt as though they were miles away. The closer they got, the more the floor vibrated, each tremor bringing them closer to the inevitable. The station was dying. Suddenly, a burst of laser fire rang out. Lena spun, drawing her sidearm, but it was too late. From the shadows, Reyes emerged, his weapon aimed directly at her. His eyes glowed with a strange, cold intensity. I told you, he said, his voice low and final. This was never about survival. It's about what comes next. The Nexus offers more than just victory, they offer evolution. You've lost your mind, Lena spat. The Nexus will destroy everything, including you. You're nothing but a pawn in their game. Reyes chuckled darkly. You still don't get it, do you, Captain? You think you're saving humanity, but all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. The Nexus was always the future. And I've already accepted it. Lena's hand tightened around the gun, her mind racing. She had to act, but there was no time to debate his twisted logic. Every second was another step closer to death. Move! Lena barked at Mackenzie and the others, pushing them forward as the laser blasts ricocheted off the walls around them. The traitor's voice grew more frantic. You'll die with this station, just like the rest of them. Lena didn't respond. Instead, she ran toward the open hangar door, heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the heat rising from the core's imminent explosion, and the metallic scent of burning fuel filled the air. Time was running out. The hangar was a mess of confusion, soldiers scrambling to prepare the last remaining ships for flight. But there was no order here. Panic had taken hold. Lena scanned the room, searching for any signs of hope, anything that would get them out. Then she spotted it. The last remaining shuttle, tucked in the far corner of the hangar, its engines still primed for launch. Over here! Lena shouted, urging her team toward the shuttle. We're taking it! But just as they reached the shuttle, a massive explosion tore through the hangar, shaking the walls and sending debris flying in every direction. The entire station seemed to tremble beneath the shockwave. Screams filled the air as men and women were thrown to the floor. The emergency lights flickered, casting the scene in a surreal red glow. Captain? Mackenzie called, his voice strained with urgency. We don't have time. We have to leave now. Lena didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the shuttle, her team following close behind. But as they approached the shuttle's hatch, a sharp, metallic screech rang out, and the doors slammed shut with a force that rattled the bones. The last thing Lena heard was the unmistakable sound of Rhea's voice, laughing maniacally from behind them. You can't escape, he taunted. Not from me. Not from the Nexus. Lena's heart sank, and for the briefest moment, everything seemed hopeless. They were trapped. Reyes had sealed them in. But then, without warning, an explosion rocked the shuttle, throwing them all off balance. The back door opened, just enough for Lena to slip through, her pulse racing as she pulled her team inside. "Go! Now!" she shouted to the pilot, who had somehow managed to keep the shuttle intact. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and with a violent thrust, they were off the ground. The station was falling apart around them, debris flying in all directions, but they were free. Lena sat in the cockpit, breathing heavily as the stars outside grew larger, their escape from the doomed station now a reality. But even as they soared into the vast emptiness of space, Lena knew the fight wasn't over. The Nexus Overlords were still out there, waiting. And as much as she hated to admit it, their fight was far from finished. Cliffhanger * the shuttle's radar suddenly flickered, signaling an incoming vessel. It was the Nexus. They had found them. Lena's knuckles whitened as she gripped the shuttle's control panel. The blinking red lights and the soft hum of the engine were all that kept her tethered to reality, as the silence of space stretched endlessly around them. But she couldn't escape the feeling of impending doom, that relentless knot in her stomach that grew tighter with every second. The Nexus had found them. She could feel it in her bones. The last few minutes had been a blur, an adrenaline-fueled escape from the collapsing space station, the screams of her team filling the air as they fought for a shot at survival. But now, as the stars blinked coldly outside the cockpit window, the cold truth settled in. This was no victory. They weren't safe. Lena looked around the shuttle's cabin. The faces of her crew were just as grim, their eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. The air was thick with unspoken words, each of them trying to process the events that had led them here: betrayal, loss, the near destruction of everything they had fought for. "Captain!" Mackenzie's voice broke through the silence. "We're not out of this yet." She turned to him. The young sergeant's face was pale, his eyes shadowed with the weight of everything they had endured. He had always been the steady one, the one who kept the rest of the team grounded, but now, even he seemed unsure. "I know," Lena said, her voice hoarse from the smoke and the strain of the escape. She wiped a hand across her face, trying to push the weariness away. "We need to keep moving. The Nexus will be on us any second." Her eyes flickered to the radar screen, which was now filled with the incoming signal. It was unmistakable, a Nexus ship, massive and unyielding, cutting through the void toward them. Its silhouette loomed larger with every passing second. "We can't outrun them," Mackenzie muttered, his voice barely audible. Lena didn't respond. There was no need to state the obvious. The shuttle's engines were small and barely capable of sustaining speed for long. The Nexus ship could wipe them out in an instant if it so desired. But they still had one advantage: surprise. And that was the only edge they could work with now. Her hand moved to the comlink. She tapped the button, the static crackling before she spoke, trying to mask the fear in her voice. "All hands prepare for evasive maneuvers. I'm going to need everyone on their toes." The crew didn't respond. They didn't need to. They had all seen what happened when the Nexus decided humanity was expendable. They had all seen the devastation. This wasn't a fight they could win by strength alone. They had to outsmart the enemy. Outmaneuver them. "I need a plan now." Lena's voice was sharp, cutting through the heavy air like a blade. She turned to Mackenzie, who was now pacing, his mind working furiously. "We can't outrun them, but we can hide. There's a debris field nearby, a few sectors over," he said, pointing to the digital map on the panel. "If we use it to our advantage, we might be able to slip past them." Lena nodded. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. The debris field was an asteroid belt, dense, unpredictable, and filled with the remains of countless battles. It was the perfect place to hide, if they could get there before the Nexus ship reached them. "Take us there, Mackenzie." "No," she ordered, settling into the pilot's seat. The shuttle lurched as Mackenzie adjusted the thrusters, sending them into a sharp course toward the asteroid field. The ship shuddered under the strain, the engines groaning in protest, but it held together. The tension in the air was palpable, every breath drawn as if it were the last. "I don't like this, Captain," one of the soldiers spoke up, her voice tinged with unease. "The Nexus is too powerful. They'll find us. We won't make it." Lena didn't turn to look at her. She couldn't afford to. "We're making it," she said, the words like iron in her chest. She didn't know if she believed them, but she had to. They all had to. The shuttle shook violently as they entered the outskirts of the asteroid field. Rocks and debris whizzed past them in the vast emptiness of space. Lena's eyes darted between the radar screen and the surrounding chaos, every pulse of the ship's engine a reminder of their fragility. Then, just as they reached the thickest part of the field, the Nexus ship appeared on the radar, a massive blip closing in rapidly. They had only minutes before it would catch up. "We're not going to make it," Mackenzie whispered, his voice full of doubt. But Lena wasn't listening. She focused on the field ahead, her mind racing through every maneuver she had ever learned. This was it. There was no second chance. "Cut power to the engines," she ordered. Mackenzie hesitated, confusion on his face. "What? Captain, are you crazy?" "Just do it," Lena snapped, her voice firm. "Cut the engines. Let's drift." Mackenzie's fingers flew across the controls, and with a flick of a switch, the engines fell silent. The shuttle drifted, caught in the gravitational pull of the asteroids. They were now at the mercy of the debris surrounding them, invisible in the vastness of space. For a moment, there was nothing but the stillness, a heavy silence broken only by the creak of the ship's damaged frame. Lena held her breath, every fiber of her being tense. Then, a voice crackled over the comlink, soft, distorted. It was a voice Lena had hoped never to hear again. "Captain Virex, I knew you'd come here." Rhea's voice was dripping with malice. "You think you can hide in this wreckage? You've underestimated the Nexus." Lena's heart skipped a beat. Reyes. The traitor. He had been more than just a soldier. He had been a collaborator, a tool for the Nexus, and now it was clear, this was all part of his plan. "You think you're safe, Lena?" Reyes continued, his voice cold. "The Nexus sees everything. It knows exactly where you are. And I'm the one who made sure you'd come here." Lena's stomach twisted. He had known their every move, from the moment they set course for the debris field. He had been the one guiding the Nexus to them. "I'll make sure you regret that." Lena's voice was steel as she pressed the button, activating the emergency thrusters. The shuttle surged forward, breaking free from the asteroid's gravity. But it was too late. The Nexus ship had already locked onto their position. The final battle had begun. Cliffhanger asterisk. As the Nexus ship powered up its weapons, Lena braced for impact. But just as the first blast fired, the shuttle was rocked by an unexpected jolt. Someone, had intervened. And that someone wasn't human.